When it comes down to the bare bones, I don't think the system changed dramatically. So we have this opportunity to bring about change. This should be more than just a new delivery mechanism.
It was a productivity tool, eased the operational challenges for professors and students to interact with each other within the educational sphere.
It's also a fantastic new delivery mechanism. It means that education can extend virtually to people in communities in need, which is very exciting.
The part that scares me the most, if they're offloading their critical thinking to an artificial intelligence, then they are not becoming intelligent, not able to think for themselves critically, and not equipped to learn new things and try new things and grow.
Reinventing education can't be just about reinventing tech and the content, and you have to think about the actual structure of the system, the people involved, and they almost need to sort of culture that needs to be reimagined.
Going forward, what does education look like in 2050? All of this education is happening outside of school. It's a very non-tech focused learning. I don't know what the future is going to be like, but I like that version of it.
Well, welcome. You are listening to Chronicles of the Galaxy. My name is Matt. This is Olympia. Good morning, Olympia.
Yes. Good morning, Matt. Yes, welcome to our show. How are you doing?
Doing very well. I'm doing very well indeed. How are you doing?
Oh, I'm okay. I don't know if you've seen those videos of the England cricket team in Australia. Their caterer showing what they're having for tea. Have you seen that one?
No, I don't think so. I saw a lot of the coverage of them arriving in Australia, of course, the sort
Okay.
of the brutal Aussie press putting the boot in.
Mhm.
Referring to, was it Joe Root? Dud Root, which I think is a sexual slur. And yeah, just generally, just yeah, watching the media pile in. But yeah, it starts this week. It's gonna be fun.
Wow. Okay. Well, it started with the England rugby team.
Okay.
Of
Yeah.
like how the guys who are responsible for the catering, they just kind of go through their entire day of cooking for the team, and so obviously rugby guys. So
I can
the
imagine it's a,
insane,
a little different, yeah.
the
Heavy on the
insane.
carbs.
Yes, and it was such a refreshing thing because you hear about Ronaldo being like all like zero fat and I don't
Mm,
know, just
mm.
very. So I was very, but then the rugby is a very different sport,
It's all about
very
the
very
bulk, I
different sport.
guess.
Hmm.
And but I've always wondered about cricket teas. So this was actual tea, what they have during the match.
Yep. So
Oh,
you
I've
can
always wondered
see.
about that because obviously, the good old days, it was like just full on food, and then you felt ill running
Well,
around afterwards.
it is still full on food. That was the weird part to me because
That's
for
it.
some
Okay.
reason it was so weird to think that these players eat. Like they're
Yeah.
real people. How? Why?
But
Why is it
mid-sport
okay?
as well. And my wife claims that this is what makes cricket not really a proper sport, is they eat halfway through and they wear jumpers. Uh, but to be fair, they only wear jumpers when it's really cold. And
Hmm.
sometimes it is really cold, especially in
Hmm.
England. But yeah, so I figured these days they'd be like, like protein bar and a sports drink and yeah, but they're fully eating.
Yes, like there is I think they had chicken and fish, proper meals cooked. I don't know why it was so weird for me to like watch Ben Stokes like standing at a food line, like it's weird. I don't get why it's weird, but I feel like my content is doing me good when it shows me these kind of videos because it's like these are real people. And this is the real thing that's going on behind the stumps once they walk off the pitch. So it was kind of refreshing, weird
It's
and
cool
so
to see this
refreshing.
kind of thing, yeah, yeah. But yeah, I'm amazed they eat properly. I just don't think I could actually go out and perform. But anyway, now listen, cricket is not our topic today. We're
No,
going to
it's
keep
not.
an eye on the cricket, particularly with the Ashes looming. But our topic today is one that you suggested, thank God. I've been suggesting far too many. So, and in the spirit of that, I'd love to probe around it a little bit with you. So you suggested EdTech. It's an
Mhm.
incredible industry, a growing industry, and a very vital and important one. Do you want to give us maybe a definition or a kind of intro into the conversation around EdTech?
Yeah, sure. Essentially, education technology has been around for a while. If you want to argue that, even rubbers and pencils and the geometry set that we used to have, those are all versions of technology that have made their way into classrooms and into our educational world. But I think now with the digital technology, which is very pervasive, edtech is an industry, and that concerns me because somewhere, as has been the case with any kind of industry, you kind of focus on making the money and making the brand, and you kind of forget the users along the way. And I think edtech is caught up in that glitz and glamour of ooh, new technology and AI, and it's a sign of progress, to include technology and have kids and adults and young adults on the up with all of technology. But I think if we lose perspective of why exactly are we doing this, if it's for education, if we don't measure for the right things, I think we run the risk of losing sight of the exact thing that it was supposed to do. And I think that's what I'm hoping we can have a conversation about. If there are some considerations that we need to make moving forward, that would be great.
You've already blown my mind with the idea of kind of the traditional technology that's been in classrooms for decades, if not hundreds of years. I hadn't really thought of that. I immediately jumped to kind of digital technology, but you're right. When you think about technology is obviously much broader than that. It could just be about tools and techniques. And yeah, that's a really interesting thought that EdTech has been, part and parcel of education for potentially hundreds of years. But when you think about the role of EdTech today, is it about leveraging technology to deliver what we would call kind of traditional education, or is it about reinventing education entirely and completely rethinking syllabuses? And I'm just wondering, what's the focus here? Is it about sort of leveraging tech to deliver the traditional, or really kind of trying to transcend that?
Yeah, I'm gonna need your help with that, Matt, because education technology, as like we just described the term, is meant to represent the digital, right? So we know it as the digital. That's where you jump to. But I do think our education system up until now is sort of broken. If you think about the fact that kids go into school filled and brimming with curiosity, and more often than not, the educational process and the construct of the way the schools are run and the curriculum that we put the kids through, um, they come out of it devoid of that curiosity lens. They come out of it trained. Obviously they're literate, they can read, they can write, they can probably do critical thinking, they know science, they know physics, they know maths, but a lot of times the things that make them go out as full humans is what education breaks in them. So I'm not saying that education was perfect to begin with. So there was room for improvement, but the way we've let technology augment our current processes needs to have a check, at least now, because we're in a transformative time because of the way AI and technology is moving. But I don't know that it's actually had that that beneficial of an impact on the education crisis also that is happening. What do you think of that? Did you think education was already fine? It's going along well. It hasn't actually been that much of an issue, and it isn't too much of an issue.
Well, no, I agree. I mean, I think, the world has changed dramatically, and assuming that EdTech can help us deliver the same approach or the same content, let's say, in a more innovative manner is, I think, missing the point. And I think the idea for me, or the opportunity inherent in EdTech is really about completely reimagining and reevaluating at least the whole end-to-end proposition of education and really thinking about outcomes. Not this isn't just about inputs. This isn't just about new ways to deliver the same old thing. This is about what outcomes do we want to achieve? How, or even taking a step further back and thinking about the outcomes we have achieved. Where has that got us? And how could we refine and enhance that? Ultimately, digital technology allows us to iteratively enhance a total cycle. And it shouldn't just be about a vehicle for sort of pushing the same product into the same pipeline. And what we should really be thinking is kind of looking at the other end and trying to understand, are we getting the outcomes we want? And really trying to feed those learnings back into the input so that the whole cycle is enhanced and evolved by technology and data and understanding and associated learnings, and being refined and finessed to elevate the whole proposition. Yeah, I mean, my kids are obviously in the school. They're in, a somewhat traditional British system, although it's being somewhat innovatively delivered here in the UAE. But yeah, when it comes down to the bare bones, I don't think that would have changed dramatically since I went through the system, 30 years ago, 40 years ago. And again, go back another generation, I'm not sure it's changed dramatically since then. So, we have this opportunity to bring about a step change. I don't believe we're in the right place today. So, yeah, I mean, absolutely, this should be more than just a new delivery mechanism. I mean, it's also a fantastic new delivery mechanism. It means that education can extend out sort of virtually to people in need, communities in need. You can take a very high quality education and sort of productize it and serve it anywhere, which is very exciting. But again, that package that you are serving everywhere needs to be the right products, the right proposition. And I'm not sure I'm not convinced we've landed that yet. So I think there's a huge opportunity there. But it hadn't really sort of occurred to me before we had this conversation. And I see now actually that, we should be really trying to think less about just digitalizing that content and really kind of reimagining how that could be reconfigured.
Exactly, madam. If there's a quote that that basically says, "Education is what you have when you forget everything." Um, right?
Well, that applies perfectly to me, I think.
What do you
Uh,
mean?
I was talking to a guy at work the other day, similar age to me, and we were both discussing how much experience we both have, but how much we've also forgotten so much. And he was training somebody the other day, and he was saying, "Don't just remember that I've forgotten way more than you know."
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
was
Hmm.
like, yeah, that's quite powerful. But yes, I mean it's true, and I think that's exactly what I'm thinking is that it's trying to look at the outcomes and thinking about the post-education product. What are we trying to achieve here? What have we actually embedded? What have we created? How well has that applied to the real world? How well has that applied to careers? How well has that applied to beyond careers to life skills? And how could that be improved? And obviously, we're all walking products of these things. So there's the outcome is clear, and therefore, the opportunities and the issues, the challenges should also be clear.
If we leave content aside, because this is a content thing, right? We have full-grown adults that come out of a 12-year school and don't know how to do their taxes, and that's supposed to be one of the biggest things that you should know how to do. We don't have basic understanding of budgets and financial savings, and a lot of these social constructs that are required, that are a key essential part of being a functioning human, is not taught in school. And so I think content wise, I think there is a divide in what is being taught in school and how we're preparing the kids to come out of it. And I think that's where I want to bring in the two parts, where education technology for kids is very different than education technology for adults, young adults, and adults in general. So I think if we're able to make that distinction, I want to kind of see if there are certain takeaways that are different, for the younger people versus the older ones. Maybe I'm wrong, but going forward after that, I think EdTech has a huge role to play, and I think it eases some of the things that traditional education won't be able to do.
I love that idea
Yeah.
about the kind of very applied life skills.
Yes.
The idea of, why is it we're spilling out of sort of formal education, not able to do our taxes? There's other things. Like why are we not able to at least understand vaguely how our car works? Fix up. I don't know. If, is that a phrase? Fix a plug? No, you change a fuse in a plug. I mean, maybe everyone does know how to do that. It's just me, but um,
No, yeah.
but these fundamentals, and they're connected to genuine core skills. Whether it's fine motor skills, but also understanding the basics of electronics and understanding the basic of just simple kind of mechanics. So, I think these things are a sort of bedrock education that perhaps would be really relevant and applied. And as you say, it just doesn't happen. I don't know whether that is an opportunity moving forwards for edtech or education at large, but it's interesting. And I also, just as you were talking about the difference between education for young people and also for young adults or adults, I was thinking about the kind of always-on educational opportunities inherent in edtech. And think about the number of people who do things like Duolingo. That's a lovely kind of daily routine that we could all be doing on a sort of broader scale. Obviously, it needs to be manageable. It still needs to be kind of bite-sized. But does it, if there are people out there learning languages, um, almost every day ongoing, what else could we be learning every day ongoing? That's potentially also a really interesting opportunity. I don't know how you feel about that.
But that's exactly it, Matt. You touched on the fact that there are so many things that we maybe should be considering going forward. And what is the entire point of education? Isn't it learning? Isn't it educating people or equipping people to continue learning so that going forward they can continue to learn how to survive, how to grow, how to change a tire, fix a whatever, switch a plug, switch a fuse, whatever that was. Because
We're not equipped. This is the problem.
it
Damn you,
is, it is.
education.
See, I mean, okay, so not to make it grim, but I come from that culture where there's a reason why all of the IT has been outsourced to India, because the Indian technology education, Indian curriculum makes very, very good followers. The kids here are taught to learn by way of memorization, and obviously also have that understanding. So memorization, that's the belief. Memorization follows understanding, and so they're very able to very well execute that. So when you give them a task, a fresh grad coming out of IIT, if you ask them to code something, they can do it. They're equipped to follow the task. But I can't say that they also have some of the other things that should be a part of learning, which is having some critical thinking, like asking why. Why is this needed? Why are we doing this? Which is important because if there is a deviation in the plan, if something goes wrong, if there's a small change in the path that they need to account for, I think they're ill-equipped to do so because they've never thought about it critically. Does that make sense? Does
It does absolutely, yeah. And I mean, you touched on the role of edtech firms, and I wonder, and forgive me if this is not the case, but is one of the challenges of edtech the fact that it's being led by private companies? I mean, because when you think about education, traditionally it's more of a public sector endeavor, but obviously with a lot of these firms, they're private sector focused, they're profitability focused, so they're very much driven by a commercial agenda. Is that one of the challenges, or is that a huge opportunity because there's real funding coming into this? What are the dynamics around that?
I would think that is certainly a challenge. There's a company, not to pick out this one company, but it was part of the research because I was excited by the company. It's called Dragonfly Thinking. It is created by this brilliant woman. The idea, the seed of the idea is great. Is that you want, when you're looking at something, when you're considering an idea or a solution or a problem or something, you want to consider it from multiple different perspectives. And a dragonfly has about like 60,000 lenses in its eye, so it can seriously consider everything from multiple different perspectives. And so that is where
Educational biomimicry is what you're talking about here.
you would think, and she's done it with AI, right? So AI and technology as it is now has allowed it to do that. So she does this demo where she puts in an idea, and she has agentic AI come in and take in multiple different perspectives. So it's like having 60 different opinions on the one thing. So which is great. I think that is the kind of thinking that I would want, and that is the kind of thinking I would want the younger generation and even ourselves to be able to do. How many times have we needed a second or a third perspective on something that is only being considered from one perspective? So this is a great idea. The problem where the part where I'm struggling with is after you've done that research, after you've done that kind of modeling, your roles are shifting. So she's like, instead of a writer, if you were a writer who is using Dragonfly Thinking or any of these software tools, instead of a writer, you're becoming an editor. Instead of a teacher, you're becoming a coach. Instead of an athlete, you're becoming a coach. My concern is what happens when all of the world runs out of the writers and the athletes. What exactly is this technology gonna coach and edit then? Who
This
is
is kind of
creating?
what AI is doing overall. Yeah, we're supposed to move up the value chain, and yeah, we're suddenly now overseeing tasks rather than delivering them. Is that not really what is sort of happening with AI across the board?
I think that is what is happening with AI across the board. And my concern is what happens next. Why
Hmm.
why are we refusing to see beyond that? If everyone's a manager, who exactly is doing the work?
We're getting dragged into another episode about AI, but I mean, it's obviously a huge part of tech, and of course, a huge part of edtech. I mean, I was doing a little bit of research around things, and I came across adaptive teaching, which sounds very cool, and I think it links to what you were just talking about, and I think it could also be very relevant over the kind of the life cycle, the full length of an educational kind of spectrum um, to again, leverage AI. I'm assuming it's AI to flex an educational model over time, whether that's for an individual or whether that's for a broader course or for a broader whole syllabus, the ability to refine and finesse, etc., over time.
That is a good idea of edtech, which is adaptive learning. And if you think about the shortcomings of education technology today, so let's focus on kids. What is the one shortcoming that happens in schools and classrooms? It's that you have one teacher for about 20 students if you're lucky. More often than not, it's 50 plus students. So you're sitting in a classroom, you've got one teacher teaching about 50 different minds, each with their own organic, unique thoughts and ways of learning. And so technology enables adaptive learning by customizing and personalizing your learning based on the ways you learn. Now that is the good part of this kind of technology. If someone's a visual learner, technology in theory should be able to would be able to come in and help that person learn visually. If someone's a logical learner, technology would adapt its teaching, give them the logic first and help them understand, and that's the way they will move forward. And that is essentially what has informed this entirely new upcoming career called instructional design. And it's a direct answer to how different people learn in different ways. Now AI tech software and ed tech software has been wholly embraced by neurodivergent individuals. So someone maybe with ADHD, someone maybe with some kind of other learning difference are able to get much more out of the software than regular people.
That's very cool. So, and to build on that, I mean, you mentioned class sizes and you talked there about different styles of learning and different challenges in the classroom, as it were, for different individuals. Where is EdTech sort of coming from? Is it coming from a place of educational excellence? How do we scale this? How do we extend this across the world? Is it coming from those pockets where education is already, in inverted commas, sort of working or fixed or functional? Or is it coming out of places where it's needed most? Is there an issue, a challenge that is being spotted in other parts of the world where innovators are really trying to sort of directly overcome that challenge and address this? I think about when you think about things like mobile payments, some of the most powerful solutions in mobile payments weren't created in more evolved Western economies where they were doing all sorts of kind of innovation, transactional activities. I think about M-Pesa being an amazing mobile payment solution that came out of Kenya because it was from the heart of the issue. They understood the issue, could see the challenge around people carrying physical money in challenging locations, more dangerous locations. So, is this innovation stemming from places that need it most, or is it more about places where it's felt to be leading and really trying to then take that and cascade that into the wider world?
I love that you brought that up, Matt, because nobody wants to harm, and that's why they create things to harm people, right? So that's you'd have to be a psychopath to do that. So all of this is born out of a genuine, out of a
Just
genuine.
thinking, we're looking at you, Elon. We're looking at you.
Right, so okay, we can just like we can post no, we should the intent is always positive. The intent is always to kind of meet a need that exists and then serve that. So if I talk about me, when the first time I used ed tech university it was called Blackboard. It's still around, university students use it. I think it's now been replaced by Canvas, but it was essentially allowing us to just upload our submissions, like our homework assignments, our capstone projects and whatnot, to the professors, and it was a productivity tool. It took out the operational challenges of printing out a lot of different sheets and putting all of this research that we are doing online and putting it else somewhere and having so it eased the operational challenges for professors and students to interact with each other within the educational sphere. So that kind of solution makes sense. But something that isn't always considered is that a lot of this technology is built on research that is weird. So weird is Western, educated,
Oh, okay.
industrialized, rich, developed data sets. So these are
Got
all
it.
they come out of that very small sect of research conducted because most of the rest of the world is either inaccessible or not ready to have this kind of research done. So this technology serves very well. It works very well in individualized society. So If there already is a culture of a lot of learner autonomy where the children are asked, like, do you want to study this? Is this something that interests you? There is choice available to the learner to choose and decide for themselves what they want to do. It makes sense there. But a lot of these other societies which are now being looked into. So there's a Professor Amy Ogan from HCI in CMU, and she's looking into this, and she started her work in Costa Rica. She's worked in Tanzania, and some of their research showed that even though the kids had a laptop and studied the exact same arithmetic that kids in the US were studying, the models and the way these kids learned was very different because in America, in the US, the kids sat at their own personal computers and they did whatever they were doing. Whereas in Costa Rica, there were 6 kids to one computer. It was a very collaborative learning experience where maybe one person was operating the computer and the rest they were talking amongst themselves and shouting out answers. And so the learning model, at the end of the day, the kids almost had the same level of understanding of arithmetic, but the way they got there was very different. So have you heard of the one laptop per child program?
Yeah, I think so.
Right, so that was a big thing almost a decade ago. The idea was that if you just equipped kids with a laptop, they would be able to like catch up. It would close the educational divide. But that is not necessarily the case. One was that it's technically not feasible because the operational costs and the infrastructure costs and electricity, internet, and all of those things do not make sense. They don't. The math doesn't work for that to happen. But on the other hand, those are kids who are being told the culture tells them what to study. They don't choose for themselves, so the way they learn and the way they are taught is very different. So if you it's not shameful, but it is part that has to be addressed. I grew up with relatively enough freedom that eventually I was able to choose my field of study in university. But the first time I was able to do that, I made the wrong choice because I had never made a choice up until then. And so if you just let kids who've had never had that autonomy, just say, okay, you've got a computer, you've got internet access, go study. That is not going to be the case because our kids are anyways easily distracted, and the distractions of choice, so much choice, and internet full of choice and full of options is only going to make it harder. So I think these models, the adaptive technology, they sound great in theory, but they're not designed holistically for all of the world that they might have access to.
You said whether one laptop per child or shared, we're talking a lot about screens. And if we go back to your kind of ADHD example, there must be many, many, I mean, a huge proportion or a significant proportion of learners that really probably don't benefit from learning through a screen and probably find that overstimulating or have various other challenges around that. And of course, my understanding is that education should be immersive, experiential. And again, if it's very, very two-dimensional like that, I mean, obviously there's a sense of interaction through a screen, but does it engage and inspire the mind in the same way as a more interactive sort of classroom setting or beyond the classroom? Get beyond a sort of traditional classroom model. You know, is screen-based learning really as effective as it could be, or is this the role of AR and VR? When I think about the opportunity to make that more immersive and more interactive, what are your thoughts around the role of EdTech in terms of really stimulating and or overstimulating as well? What are the challenges in that space?
Yeah, I love that you bring that up because also just a tiny aside. So this is the year that I've been catching up with a lot of shows. Slow Horses was obviously there. Abbott Elementary is a sitcom of a black lady who is an early education teacher who joins a public school. They're underfunded, and so they obviously some of their channel challenges are getting school supplies for the kids. There's a very funny episode about how when the school introduces technology for the kids, and it's not the kids who are struggling with the technology, it's the educators. Older teachers um, who've been around, who've been teaching their kids for 20, 30 years. And so they're very good at what they do and in getting the kids engaged, getting them to care about all of the concepts, but they struggle with uploading. So she's struggling with uploading her curriculum, the way she runs the classes onto whatever the new system is. So these teachers, these educators who have already perfected their method, and they keep on obviously customizing it to their kids and every group of new kids that come in to get them to stay engaged, to get them to stay engrossed in the subject and to get the most out of their learning. And so they were the ones who were struggling with getting on board. The technology, Professor Amy Ogan recognizes is that the problem isn't our kids who are going to come in, because they're almost AI natives. They're digital natives for sure. These are kids who are given a mobile phone or an iPad very early on in their life, and so they know how to click about and get the reaction from a screen and stay engrossed enough. So it was about equipping the educators in translating all of these different years and all of these different disciplines into educating, into putting it into the digital platform and making that work for the kids and the school. So I think it has to be a little bit of both, where it's not just about the learners, but it's also about the facilitators who conduct that learning. And if you think of what education can look like in the future. So there's a book by Harvard professor Howard Gardner. He wrote this book years ago called Multiple Intelligences, where he talks about the different kinds of intelligence that he has worked with. So he doesn't have a very specific confined method of learning or confined method of teaching. All of the different areas that interest him, he pulls from all of it and he puts them together, and that's why he called it multiple intelligences. But in it, there are basically 5 schools of education that he is concerned about going forward. So the first is discipline, right? Is education teaching your child to be disciplined? Are we getting discipline out of that learning? Are we able to, the second is synthesis. Are we able to synthesize all the information that we're getting and create connected patterns and create those connections, make sense of that, of all of that data, all of that information that we're gathering? The third is creative. Are we creating something with all of this information? Are we equipping our kids, are we equipping our learners to be able to create something and make something out of this? And then the fourth point is respectful. Are we teaching our kids to be respectful of the different worldviews, the different cultures, of the people, of the real human beings that we're interacting with? And the fifth one, which is the most important, is ethical, which is, are you able to make the right choices? Are you able to be on the right side of any kind of situation? Are you able to find solutions and speak up when there is need for there to be morals and ethics involved? And so according to him, these are the 5 disciplines or 5 schools of education that are going to be important going forward. And he reimagined this in a blog post. He reimagined this going forward in 2050. So what does education look like in 2050? All of this education is happening outside of school. So one of the first things that he mentions is museums. I don't know. So if you think back to your childhood school experiences, one of my best experiences was going on school field trips to a science fair. And we did the whole like static thing. You touch that like little ball of whatever energy, and your hair just kind of poof up. So my hair is born ready for that activity, and that has stuck with me. So have you done any of those things? Did you have that in your school? Was that part of your kids' curriculum maybe?
Well, no, absolutely. The school trips were fantastic. But I remember I was at school in slightly eccentric British boarding schools in the early 80s. So, we kind of did those kind of experiments live in the science
Uh-huh.
labs. And I say science labs, they were not science labs. I remember we used to do all sorts of stuff where we kind of electrocute each other. And I had a retired brigadier from the British Army as my science teacher, and he was very, very clearly not qualified. I think he was very knowledgeable, and he certainly he didn't understand whether to draw the line between acceptable and unacceptable. So we all sorts of japes and activities happened. But the point is they were actually very memorable and actually quite educational. I do think he and others like him really understood how to make learning something that you would more experience than just witness and therefore remember over time. And I love. I mean, you've made a lot of really interesting points there, but I love that point you said about, it's not just about, so reinventing education can't be just about reinventing sort of tech and the content and what's fed into the system. You have to think about the actual structure of the system itself and the people involved, and they almost need to. It's that sort of culture that needs to be reimagined and embedded. And it's easy to think you've got young teachers coming into the system, but if they've already gone through that education themselves and they've already been sort of molded as teachers themselves, then again, they're not necessarily going to be purposed for rethinking that whole process. There were other really great points in there that I wanted to pick out. Yeah, it's absolutely fascinating. When I was doing research for this, I was looking at the sort of top edtech companies, and I really didn't recognize many of the brands. I think there were maybe a couple of sort of established educational brands in the top 100. Maybe I think Google was in there. Learning by Google, something was around top 70. Is that is that exciting to think that there's brands and businesses that we just don't know coming into this world, or do you think it won't work until the bigger, more established educational bodies and the more established tech businesses really step into this world, or is it better left to these smaller innovators?
And so that's an interesting point that I didn't look at. Thank you for looking into that, and it makes sense that learning by Google is at 70, and then I think there might be a couple of more which are coming. I mean, so I'm sure you've heard of Khan Academy, right? There's Khan
Yes,
Academy, there
yes.
is Udemy, there is
I know
Teachable, there's
Udemy.
Thinkific.
Okay,
So I think there are enough brands out there, but again, these are all other than maybe Khan Academy. Everything else is for adult learners which
right.
um which makes sense. I think we've talked about the kids enough. They're fine. They can just
Enough
go
of the
clear.
kids, Olympia. Jesus.
Well, actually, I will finish with one thing for the kids because it's as part of the learning for the future bit that it makes sense to me. Toronto has this thing called Ontario Science Museum.
Hmm.
And so as soon as I moved there, that was one of the first things I wanted to see. And it's a museum where kids are encouraged to touch things. So they're encouraged to come in and play around and try different activities. And so I was very surprised that because museums are usually not the place where you go and touch things, that's not what you do. But turns out Ottawa has three of these, and they're continuing to build more of these. So Ottawa has one focused on food and agriculture, one focused on space tech, and the third one I forget. Like they have these innovative programs called Prio and Cryo, where so kids and their families walk in and they're encouraged to watch demonstrations and participate in cryo freezing something or setting fire to something. And I don't know how much learning happens with that. Like you said, if you've already done these kind of social experiments in school, but I do think it's a fun way of learning. And the reason why I bring it up, it's a very non-tech focused learning. I don't know what the future is going to be like, but I like that version of it. But coming back to these big tech brands coming up, I think adult learners are the main focus right now, who learn very differently from kids. I mean, if you think about why you're learning, there are some people who like to just learn for the sake of learning. I need to learn Snowflake now; it's a new thing. I'm curious about SQL. The people who are naturally curious and want to continue to grow and evolve, and the continuous learning is a part of their background that they are now being catered to by these companies. So Udemy allows anybody who's an expert to come in and create a course, and you can be a part of that masterclass. And a lot of these are created by individuals. So Google, I think, might be what is part of the bigger companies who do offer these a lot. So if you think about all of the certifications that Microsoft has, AI certifications, IBM has a lot of design thinking, Google has everything from cloud to AWS. And so these are all pathways to their own products and services. If you in one way, they're basically enabling people to learn how to better use their infrastructure. And so there it's I think it's incentivized learning that is a key term there, because if you do not tell people how to use your cloud software, chances are something that might be easier to use or a legacy system that is already plugged in to your existing infrastructure is going to be the default choice, because it's less switching costs. Do you think anybody can be a teacher? Can anybody be an expert, or is this specifically just for certain people with certain credentials?
I think if we're talking about adult learning, I think it's fine. Yeah. I mean, I guess, if someone's willing to engage with that content, then fine. I mean, obviously, I think it becomes more challenging and more legally and ethically concerning when it spills into a child environment, a child-focused environment, where you obviously need to have those filters and those controls. And yeah, I mean, I think it's interesting that you might have a sort of marketplace for EdTech, and I don't know the examples you've shared, but it sounds like they're effectively that. And that's I think it's a really lovely kind of use case of the internet and of technology at large, with some kind of guardrails and some controls around that, of course. But it's a really interesting area. I worry that a lot of these brands and these businesses are defaulting to kind of adult learning. One, because there's appetite there. Two, because it's also quite easy to commercialize. Just app based and it can be subscription based, and as you say, often might connect back into a broader subscription to a sort of pro product. Having kind of allowed them to understand how to use that platform and that product in sort of further detail. I still think the most vital and exciting opportunity here is focused around the youth and children, sort of child learners. And I imagine that's a much more kind of knotted and kind of gnarly and complex environment. Obviously there's a huge amount of legal requirement around there. There's obviously it's not about just a private endeavor. There's probably going to be a huge amount of public and sort of governmental engagement relations around that, and it's inherently complex because it's as per the model that you referred to earlier, it's multi-dimensional. You can't just think about functional learning. It's also about embedding values, and that's the important part of growing for the future, is really understanding the role that education needs to play in sort of creating rounded individuals for the future of society. And that's much more complex, and as I say, much more kind of fraught with challenges and issues. But for me, that's the ultimate kind of battleground, personally, because I just think there's such an opportunity there to really kind of tackle something and then begin to scale that at large. And again, obviously, education does need to flex to the way individuals learn, but it also needs to flex to different cultures and communities, both in terms of its content, but also in terms of how it engages them and engages audiences across those different markets. So I do think it's very complex, but I do think it's really it's a huge opportunity. But that's sort of my key point of view on things.
It is, man. And I feel like I've come off very, very aggressively against EdTech. I thought I'd changed my perspective on this in the course of preparing for our pod, but I realized there's too much at stake with kids and young people. I don't know if you've heard, I think earlier this year, Sweden invested or committed to investing almost 100 million, for bringing back textbooks and pencils and physical educational materials back into the classroom, which is a dramatic turnaround than a decade ago, where they said, oh, it's all computers and all the internet and stuff like that. I think Sweden has this population that is small enough and has a budget that is stretchy enough to allow this kind of a maneuver to happen. But there are so many unstudied aspects of the effect of constant digital technology in our faces, and learning and comprehension, and are you actually becoming literate? Are you actually gaining something out of it? So I think there's too much at stake there. As maybe closing thoughts, if you think back to how humans have maintained all of this millennia of information. We've been around for decades and decades, and we've passed down information that has that started us from building a wheel to creating motor cars, to now creating EVs, off the backs of all of these different years of information. And the technology didn't exist back then, right? So technology, as we're talking about it today, right now, the digital environment is a mere 25, 30 years, 50 years existence. And so if advancement has been happening without it for so long, and it's been continuous, we've been growing continuously, I wonder if you're at all concerned about how this digital connection between humans, and not direct connection between humans, is going to affect it. Because I mentioned over the summer we went to Rabindranath Tagore's, or his school, and he has this, the setup of the education of his classroom was simple. It was a tall tree shaded enough for kids and himself to sit at. That's it. He was there, the kids were there, and he was talking to them, and we educated people through stories. If technology, to me, the connector of a technology is this live kind of connection, where you're able to share your stories live, you're able to talk to these kids, engage with them. If you're unable to do so in person, virtually, I think that is the best part, where you're speaking to them live.
Well, I wonder if what we're saying here is that the critical part of education is sort of harnessing humanity, and if technology can do that and almost superpower it and supercharge it, then fantastic. Because I think what we're saying is that we've always had invention, we've always had ingenuity, so we don't necessarily need digital tech to deliver that. And so what we need to always do, and we've relied on this human storytelling, etc. So if we can still encapsulate that humanity and deliver it maybe faster, maybe deeper, maybe richer, then perhaps then we're in a good place. But if we start to lose that humanity and it becomes a very sort of cold functional engagement without that narrative, without that sort of human ingenuity, then suddenly we start to lose the texture that really makes humanity and our race effectively function and evolve. So then, what form of education are we scaling then? So I don't know. I just wonder whether there is still a huge opportunity with EdTech, but we just need to make sure that the fundamental ingredients are folded into that allows it to still be the right expression of everything we stand for, but only scaled.
Exactly. Let's retain and keep our humanity within the sphere of all of these advancements. I feel like, does it feel inconclusive at the ending of this pod? Should there be a more definitive?
A little, but I think it's okay. We've meandered, we've probed, we've chronicled.
We have, yes.
We've done some sunshine and dark chronicling, and I think we've got to some sort of broad, open-ended conclusion, which I think is good for listeners of different stances. So I'm happy. If you're happy, are you happy?
Yes, of course, Matt. Because perspectives, having your thoughts just kind of helped me filter out what I was also looking at. So it is definitely helpful. We would love to hear your thoughts as well.
Absolutely.
If you have some serious concerns, if you have some ideas, if you're for, against, if you have anything else for us to kind of look at, we would love to hear from you.
Even your educational experience. I spoke about a few of mine educational experiences, and you touched a little bit on your educational past, but we all remember stuff from school, good and bad. Please share and how that connects into your thoughts for education moving forwards. We'd love to hear.
Exactly. Thank you so much. Thank you, Matt, as always, for indulging me in this very grim, very important subject. We're all set for something very exciting coming next week. Thank you for listening, and join us in the next one.
See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.